everyone, thank you so much for joining us to talk about the world to come. I'm Christian Blavith, managing editor of IndieWire, and we are so lucky to have this incredible cast and this incredibly talented filmmaker. To have Katherine Waterston and Vanessa Kirby and Casey Affleck and Mona Fastvold, who's responsible for it all. It's really wonderful to have you here. Mona, I guess let's start with you. You know, Casey had really fallen in love with the story and had brought it to you originally to get you involved. What was it about it that really spoke to you, and what did you think that you could bring to it as a storyteller and filmmaker?
Well, first of all, it was just a very beautiful script. It was so beautifully written, and I love the text. Right away I sort of felt, I think when you read a script and you immediately just see some images very clearly, and you know that you feel deeply compelled to creating those images. I think that's, for me, is like the first sort of way into something. And then both Casey and his partner with the collator were just very collaborative and open to seeing, just like, so how would you do this, and who would you want to make it with? And it was a project that was it was, sometimes you can be invited into a party and there's a lot of stuff happening, and this was sort of it was more just, here you can kind of do what you want with this, and that was exciting as well. And then they were all both very excited and supportive about the casting choices that I had and who I wanted to work with, and the crew I wanted to bring in. So that was that. And I think that also the story in itself, it was so, I thought that this very, like, in some ways, very like old-fashioned, beautiful, traditional period piece, but that had the subject matter and the way that it handled the relationship between the two women, as well as the women's relationship with their other partners, were just something really exciting and new about that. So that was fun.
And Casey, you really fell in love with Jim Shepard's story, and then you brought in Ron Parsons, who had written The Assassination of Jesse James, to come in and help develop the script, which then Mona contributed to as well. But why did, what was it to you that, like, you felt like this is such an important story to tell? What was it about it specifically that spoke to you in that way? And what made you think that Mona was the best person to tell the story?
The script just struck me as, it was very moving. It was just really well written. And I knew that Ron Hansen and Jim Shepard were both strong writers, and that they would, they turn it into a great script. And the minute I heard Mona talk about the project, it's just, she understood it, and I loved her movie, and so she seemed like the best choice.
It's an interesting film because it's set in 1856 at a time in which there's really no language to describe what happens between Abigail and Tally, and thus so much is left unspoken. Katherine, Abigail, I mean, such a rich internal life, and yet she really is incapable of expressing so much of that and sharing that, certainly with her husband. What did you find so intriguing and unique about this character?
I think it did articulate something for me that I did really relate to, which is a feeling that it's not that you lack ideas. It's not that you struggle to figure out what you'd like to do with what you've got, with your minds and your like brief time on Earth, but that there's just no place in your world for you. But it struck me, and what I found really fascinating was someone who I didn't really see her as bashful, but that she couldn't speak because there wasn't a place in her world for the language she had to speak. Would there be anyone there to hear it? Would there be anyone there to understand it? Would anybody be receptive to it? So it's really not until she meets Tally that she has ever encountered someone who she feels might be truly receptive to what she is, what she has to give. And still then, it's new territory for her, how to express it, how to dare to share it. And in that sense, well, it's an old story, you know, in how people fall in love and find each other. I don't know that she is, what she goes through in the film is at all unique. It's quite universal. But what struck me and what I found so exciting to play was this really rich, well-developed love story, ultimately, right? That it in many ways is a celebration of what another's love can do for you, how it can create this sort of fertile ground for for growth. So all of that was intriguing, and you know, a lot of other things on a nerdy actor level, like this, the chance to do the voiceover was really exciting to me. It's not a kind of tacked on voiceover like you often see in films that needed something explained or solved in post-production, so they kind of tape it on the end. It felt deeply embedded in the script, and I don't know, had a kind of a purity to it and an honesty that yeah, was really intriguing to me. And you know, Casey talked to me about this a lot on set. I don't know if you remember, but just it was very helpful to me to be mindful of the tremendous gulf between the person that she shows with the world and what goes on inside. And as an actor, especially when you're working with really talented people, it can be quite exciting. And when they give you a lot, the temptation is to give it back, you know. That was a challenge for me to try to contain myself. That was really fun, but yeah, a bit foreign territory for me.
Because, you know, I mean, Katherine has just suffered this horrible trauma of losing her daughter. Abigail has just suffered this horrible trauma of losing her daughter, and, you know, just going through all this grief, and you know, it's like she life seems to have lost a lot of its color for her in a way, and Tally seems to bring that color back into her life. And Tally is so expressive and so about sensation, even though she's in this abusive marriage. You know, Vanessa, how did you go about expressing those contradictions in her? Because she's obviously, Tally is going through so much, you know, on her own, but she also is just this wellspring of life for Abigail.
I love that you said the color analogy, because I always thought of it a bit like that. I didn't know quite how to play it necessarily, but more just that this is someone that is like Technicolor person, you know, that comes in a room and just sort of like lights it up. And for me, it sort of always starts from the inside, really. So it was just a question of thinking thoughts that were like that. Literally just thinking like that, and I hope that it would kind of translate, really. But I think that's, you know, that's what sort of defines her, as someone that thinks far bigger than what she's been given. And so it was so nice to play that, because you just got to think big, really, and try not act too big and ruin the film.
You know, Vanessa and Katherine, both of you go between blockbusters, you know, the Mission Impossible films for Vanessa, and Alien and Fantastic Beasts for Katherine, and then much, you know, smaller indie films like this one. You know, for both of you, what did you learn about yourselves while making this film?
Someone asked me this the other day, and I feel like I can't answer it for 5 years, because, you know, it takes so much time to figure out I don't know what the hell's going on in my life. You know, I don't know. I think about the kids today and how they're experiencing the pandemic, and I just can't wait for 10 years to pass before I can ask them really what they've been experiencing, you know? I don't know that I can answer it. Maybe Curbs can.
I don't know about the difference, but I definitely learned from this film about what it was like for women in 1860 and so many of our ancestors, and I've said this before, I quite literally felt ignorant actually to not that long ago how little choice you had in your life. And it made me incredibly grateful for the freedoms we have in ours comparatively. And so I think every project you do, in a way, you learn something new about yourself. And that is always the thing that, you know, some movies are watched, some movies aren't, some are forgotten, some are, you know, really, I don't know, admired. But it's so much of it is about the process, I think, what you learn while doing it. And that's the thing that carries on.
In a way, I mean, what this film said to me was, even though it's 1856 and it's a milieu that feels so remanded to the distant past in a way, it actually did speak to me in the present moment. And that, you know, here's a woman, Abigail, dealing with grief. Here's you know, another woman who's in an abusive relationship. There's a lot of trauma processing going on here, and dealing with, you know, the aftermath or ongoing issues that are so deeply painful, which actually did weirdly feel relevant to me in this present moment. Like here in 2021, after everything the world has been through the past year, it felt like, you know, a lot of people are going through something kind of similar to this. You know, we're not working on a farm, you know, without electricity and modern conveniences, but, you know, it did feel to me like it spoke to the present moment in a way. I'm curious, Vanessa, like, what do you think, like, how have recent current events affected you and your creative process and the way you approach your work?
You know, we really felt while we were filming it, and obviously the film was so much about isolation and not being able to connect, and this brief moment in time where these two people actually connect and sit with each other and feel present and feel seen and heard and kind of, yeah, witnessed in some way. And I think that's what we're all missing. I miss it every day, just being able to sit with people that you love. And so I hope the movie feels a little bit more relevant because of that.
I remember that just physical vulnerability, you know, that's something when we were making the film, we thought when people go to see this, they'll think, oh, how terribly sad that in the old days you could get a cold and that would be that for you. You know, when we were in Venice and at the beginning of the film, Dyer gets sick and he coughed. When he coughed for the first time, you just felt this chill through the audience there. That really surprised me, and it didn't quite occur to me until I was sitting there, just what that, how that would maybe it'd be meaningful to the audience now, and how they connect to it. And so much of the film is about vulnerability of one kind or another. All of these relationships, not just the central love story, but the dynamics between the married couples too, you know, is about what you're able to talk about, what you're afraid to talk about, what you don't have the tools to talk about, and how scared you are, and how exposed you may feel to the elements, and also to illnesses, and yeah, along with obvious, like the emotional vulnerability. So yeah, it's just one of those funny things that it turns out to be, you know, an oddly prescient film.
This film, you know, I think, I mean, obviously it made a splash at Venice a few months ago, but I think this is one that's really going to continue to resonate for a while. I mean, what's like the one thing that you really hope that people take away from this movie? You know, open to everyone here. What do you hope people carry with them from it when they see it?
I just think that, you know, when you set out to make a movie, it takes so much, it demands so much of everyone involved, and it takes so many years. It's hard to make a movie. So at least for me, if I make a film, I really hope that I'm not making it for, you know, the fall of 2020, you know, or the spring of 2021, that you make a love story that is timeless, and that will just, you know, that people will go back to, because there is something human there that moves them, and that's it.
That's beautifully said. I mean, you know, like Casey, for you, this was such a, you know, it was such a passion project to get this made, and you know, now that it's here, I mean, what do you hope that people will find in it yourself?
Well, I can't say it any better than Mona did. You know, people find so many things in something. It has a lot to do with what they bring to the movie. But I don't think that we could have given this a better shot with this cast and with Mona, it seems like we delivered the story and the screenplay the best way that we could. And if people find something in it that they can take away, then that's all we could do.
Vanessa and Katherine, I mean, what was the single hardest thing about shooting this film? I mean, there's so many dramatic sequences, the snowstorm and all, but was there anything in particular that was just, wow, that was really tough?
Fucking a chicken is not a walk in the park.
We didn't like that, did we?
That was
No,
fascinating day for both of us.
we didn't like that.
I think sitting in the discomfort of imagining the loss of my child was it by a mile. I was pregnant when I got the script, or soon after. I can't recall the exact timeline there, but all the time that I was preparing for the role, and then while we were shooting was, gestation and early months of my child's life. So it's a strange thing, because I think, preparing for a role is kind of like, it's kind of like overpacking for a holiday. You just, if you shove everything into the bag for any kind of weather, any kind of situation, and the odds are that you might have the thing you need. You don't necessarily know what the thing you need will be in advance. And so, it seemed to me stupid not to consider, while I was carrying my child and spending the first few months of my child's life, with them, seemed a bad idea not to bring that thing in the luggage, as it were. It's not really the way I normally like to work. The idea that you sort of bring lower the character to your level and your experience, bring what to the character. It's obviously an act of the imagination to create a character, and you always are building things that are like far outside of your own personal experience. But when you find yourself in a situation like that, and the question arises, like, should I invite this in? Should I consider and add to this bag of tricks my own experience? I mean, it feels idiotic not to, and quite morbid to do it. So it was an odd kind of internal conversation during that time, but definitely wasn't the most comfortable.
The most difficult, I couldn't think of the most difficult part. I had the best time ever on this film. I loved every second of it. I loved it. We were in the middle of nowhere filming. It was just us. We all so believed in it and loved it. And just, I felt lucky to be there every day, honestly. So
we had to hike to set every day, and she did it with a ankle.
Yeah, that was hard. That was hard, having to sit still in scenes, which I'm never good at because I broke my ankle. But no, it was just one of those really lucky, magical things, I think, where you just feel really happy doing something and representing something on screen that is so rarely, really. The voice of those women from those days that's so forgotten. There's barely a trace of them and their stories and their lives and their sacrifices, actually. And being so caged, I think, from being who they really are, or even being able to explore who they really are. And so I'm really honored that we get to tell that story. I think it's really important, and it definitely changed me knowing that and what, literally our ancestors went through so that we could have the relative freedoms that we do today.
Beautifully put. And for a lot of filmmakers right now, it's going to be hard beyond Sundance to, get their films out there. And, what do you think, just open to anyone who wants to chime in, but what advice would you give to the storytellers and filmmakers who come after you?
I think this is a good time to write, if you can. I think, right. I mean, and I think that even though right now it's compelling to think really small, because that seems like the limitations on any project right now, that it has to take place in a house or something, or in a COVID bubble. I think that because it takes a long time to make movies, and we will be on the other side of this at some point, then there's no reason to think still think big and think big stories. You know, think expansive and be ambitious, because I don't think we're gonna want to just talk about being locked inside a room with someone, or like, I think we're going to be past that on the other side of it. So spend this time just really dream up something exciting and new that's not this experience.